So the first thing we're going to do is on Google Classroom, I have a link right here. It says Java FX Setup. We're going to click on that, and it brings up this site. Let me know when you're there. On the very first page, come down here at the bottom of the syllabus, and it's got Java FX Setup. Click on that link right there. Okay? So it looks like this. So the first thing I'm going to do is going to click on this very first link. It says go to that link right there, and it looks like this. And I'm going to go ahead and on my operating system, I'm going to select Windows, or so select whatever you have, and I'm going to select the 64-bit, and I'm going to grab the SDK, and I'm going to click Download. What version are you using right now? Okay, use that. Use the 64-bit, X64. And then grab the SDK. And down here it says supported platforms. Go ahead and click on this download. You got it? SDK. And then click download right here. Did you get it? Okay. We're going to go back to the other link. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Eclipse. Let's do this first. Let's go to wherever we downloaded that at. Mine happens to be in my download folder, and it says Open FX. And let's unzip it, and we're going to grab this folder. You see this Java FX SDK 22.0.2. Oh my God! I'm sorry. I'm over here talking like you can see my screen. So let me go back to downloads. So I see this OpenFX22 zip file. Do you have that? Let's double click on it, open it, and on that folder right there, that Java FX SDK 22.0.2, I'm going to do a right click on that. I'm going to click copy, and then I'm going to just come over here and put it in my documents folder on the left hand side. So in there, I'm just going to click paste. So now here in my documents folder, I've got Java FX SDK 22.0.2. Did you get that? Okay. So now we're going to open up Eclipse, and we're going to go to Java build path. So we're going to go to preferences first. So in here we're going to go to Windows, Preferences, are you there? And we're going to click Expand Java, Expand Build Path, and they want us to go to User Libraries. So click on User Libraries right here. And then we're going to click New, and we're going to create a new folder. So we're going to click New, and we're going to create a new library name. I'm going to call mine, you call yours Java FX. I already have one here, so I'm going to call it Java _ FX. But you can call yours just Java FX. And then click OK. Okay. Then we're going to click on that new library, and we're going to click on Add External Jars. So click on that and click Add External Jars. Now what we need to do is go to our Documents folder and double click on that Java FX SDK folder, and then double click on Lib, and then click on the very first one, hold down your Shift key and click on the very last one, and then click Open. And then we're going to click Apply and Close. So down here at the bottom, we're going to click Apply and Close. Now, we're going to go back to Preferences and Java and install JREs. So Windows, Preferences, Java, install JREs right here. And then the one that's highlighted, the JRE, click on it and then click Duplicate. And we are going to call this Java. It's right here in the JRE name, call it Java FX. And then on this page right here, you're going to copy this for Windows. You're going to copy this module all the way through JavaFX.fxml. Copy that. I think we have to put that. Yep, default VM arguments. So we're going to paste it right here in this default VM arguments. So click it right there. Click Paste. Now, before we click Finish, see where it says Path to Java FX Lib. So what we need to do is come over here to File Explorer and open up that Java FX SDK file and open up the lib folder, and then come up here and copy that path. I'll do a right click and copy. Am I going too fast? Okay. Then I'm going to come back over here to, and we're right in between these two parentheses, or these two double quotes, I'm going to paste it in. So module path C, whatever your documents, and then it's got that Java FX SDK Lib. Let's do this. This Java FX, let's put an underscore JRE. You can make it all lowercase, JRE. And then click Finish. And I think we have to check that one then. And then, yeah. So if you hover over it, it says Java FX underscore JRE, check that box, and then click Apply and Close. Now, if you're going to create a new Java FX project, you will click on File, Point to New, and Java Project. And you want to make sure it says Use the Project Specified JRE. Make sure you click on this drop down and select that Java FX JRE. And then when you click Finish, it's going to be using the correct Java runtime environment. Okay, so now we got the correct Java runtime environment. So let's do this. Let's go back over here and let's go back to Google Classroom. Let's go to Classwork and Source Files, and let's download chapter12.zip. And let's go back over to Eclipse, and we're going to click on File, Import, Existing Projects into Workspace, Next, and we'll select that Chapter 12. And click Finish. And we now have a Chapter 12 sitting over here. If you get this to come up, says Market Solutions Available, let's just go ahead and click Cancel. And now if we expand Chapter 12, let's open my first GUI, my first GUI. And I just want to run it and see if it works. Yep, mine worked. Did yours work? All right. Okay. So we got that up. We all set up for a GUI application. So beginning of Chapter 12, it talks about what a graphical user interface. We also call it a GUI. GUI we call it a GUI interface. This basically what we're going to do is we're going to actually display dialog boxes to our user that they can actually utilize, and they can click on different things and type in different text boxes, so on and so forth. Now, what we're not going to get. I don't think we're going to get to it tonight, but eventually we're going to get to this thing called event-driven GUI application. Now, what an event-driven application is, the event is something that we do. We're either going to type in a text box, we're going to click on a button, we're going to hover our mouse over something, we're going to click and drag. There's all kinds of different events that we can do that will basically cause us, and that we can capture that event and tell our program to do something when that event happens. So just by clicking on something, that is basically an event. I can click on a button, I can type in a text box, I can hover, so on and so forth. That's the event-driven part. So on page 762, we get into the introduction of Java FX. And the first thing it talks about is the different controls that we have. And we have a label control. All that does is put a label on our object, our dialog box that we're bringing up. We have a text field. We have a field in there where we can actually type text into. We have a button control, which actually has a button that we can click on and have it do things. So those are the different controls. And those aren't all the only controls we have, but those are the ones we're just getting introduced to right now. So on page 763, we talk about stages and scenes. And basically what a stage is a window. Okay? So think of a stage as like if we're going to have a play, we would have a stage where our play is basically taking place, and every time we change to a new, maybe we're switching from this one background to a different background. That's called a scene, and so that scene is basically what is currently being displayed on the screen right now. And we have that in our Java FX applications. We have our stage, which is the window. Then inside the window is this thing called a scene. And the scene is just a group of GUI applications, GUI objects, whether it be labels, buttons, text box. We got sliders. We got all kinds of different controls that we have available to us. And those are basically inside of there. Down on the bottom, towards the bottom of page 763, we have three types of nodes. We have our root node, and there's always just one root node, and that's the parent of all the other nodes. We have a branch node and a leaf node. A branch node can have other nodes inside of it, and then we have a leaf node, which only you branch to, but it never branches off of that. And that's kind of what our dialog boxes do. I can actually open up a main dialog box, which is our root, and then I can click on things and move to other dialog boxes, and that's basically what those nodes are. Now, if we look right here on my first GUI, my first GUI, notice we have extends application. And if we look up here, if I expand this import, notice I've got javafx.application.application, capital A application. And then I've got javafx.stage and then uppercase S stage. So this application, we're extending that. So we are basically inheriting everything that's in this application. And the application class has a start. It has a start method. That start method is basically where we basically always that's where that kind of brings up the GUI application. Now, how do we call this thing? Well, top of page 765, it says the main method only does one thing. It calls the launch method, which is right here on line 15. And that launch method, which is inherited from the application class. So the launch is inherited from the application class. And when that is called, it automatically calls the start method. So the launch is basically in the application class that we inherited. And when we launch it, it's going to grab whatever arguments are passed to it through the public static void main, and it's going to pass it to the state, to that guy. And then it basically, when we click on, or when we call launch, it automatically, we can't see it. It's inside the application class, but it calls this start method. So when we call launch, it automatically calls the start. And if we take a look, I've got primary stage. So notice that basically it automatically brings in the stage, and it's past a primary stage. Again, that's all part of the application class. And then primary stage.setTitle, my first GUI application. Now that sets everything in place. We don't see it until we call line 25, primary stage.show. That's when it displays the stage. So again, when we run it, there's the window. We have a resizable window. We can actually resize this guy. It's resizable. It's got a minimize, maximize, restore, and close button. But notice up here at the top, when I said my title, notice it says my first GUI application. That's where the title gets put in place right there. Now, we didn't set any scenes. All we did was create a stage. So just created an empty window, we haven't put anything into it yet, which is what we're going to do next. So the bottom page, any questions so far? So the bottom page 765, we're going to talk about creating scenes. A scene is a collection of controls and other objects in the JavaFX GUI. So here's how it works. The stage, we can only put scenes into a stage. We can't put controls directly into a stage. We have to put them into a scene first, and then we put the scene on the stage. So the steps you follow in creating a scene are: we create the controls, we create the layout container, we create a scene object, and we add the scene to the stage. So we don't know what all that means, but those are those steps. So on top page 766, it talks about creating controls. We must write an import statement for the class that we want to work with. So, for example, if you want to create a label control, we have to import the label class. It's part of the JavaFX. And the example they have there is just label, message label equals new label, and then we say hello world. So nothing different than what we've done in the past when we basically create a class. We create an object from a class. So, and we would do the same thing with a button. We would do the same thing with the text box, so on and so forth. And we'll see those examples in a few minutes. But the next thing we need is we also need a layout container. Now, container goes inside of an object, and so a layout container are an important part of JavaFX. You use the layout container to arrange the position of the controls on the screen. So if we just threw a bunch of controls into the scene, that's exactly what it's going to do. It's just going to put them in the upper left-hand corner and then just basically put them across. And that's we need more control there. So when we use a layout container, we can actually say, I want them to be displayed this way, horizontally, or I can have them displayed vertically. I can also center them. I can also right align. I can also left align. And the containers we're going to use there on page 76 is what's called an H box. H is horizontal, a V box, which is vertical, and then we have a grid pane. And I want you to think of a grid pane as a table. Tables have rows and columns. Bottom of page 767, it talks about creating a scene object. So let's just go ahead and do that. Let's open up Hello World. And if we look up here, you'll notice we have an application. We're importing an application, a stage, a scene, a layout, HBox, and a control label. We come down here, notice that we've got class Hello World extends application. Here's our public static void main. The only thing in there is launch and then arguments. And then over here, notice we've got the override because we're going to override the start method that's in the application class. And there we create a label. So label, we're going to create a message label object from the label class. We're going to instantiate as new label, and we're going to put the text hello world in that label. Now here's my here's my layout that I'm going to utilize, my layout container, which is my HBox. So I create an HBox object from the HBox class, and notice it's got new, we're going to instantiate as a new HBox, and look what we're putting into it. Look what gets put into the constructor, the message label. I create a scene, and so there's my scene object. I'm going to instantiate it as a new scene, and look what goes in there, an HBox. Then I set my primary stage, and what it's set to a scene. So notice it's kind of like we got a stack of boxes, right? I've got my boxes, I got my big box, I put in a smaller box, and a smaller box. And that's kind of what's going on here. My stage is my big box. I'm going to put a scene into that. My H box goes into the scene. My label goes into the H box. I set the title of my stage, my first scene, and then I show it. Let's go ahead and run it. And there it is. Now you'll notice it's a tiny little window because we didn't set the size of the window. We just said throw a label in there, or put a label in an H box container, put that container inside of a scene, put that scene in a stage, and then display the stage. That's the only parameters that we put in there. So that's basically that's the smallest window you can actually create. I don't think you can get that window any smaller. See that? If I tried to make it smaller that way or that way, well, I guess I could make it smaller vertically, but it's going to default to the size of the label. So any questions on that? So we click on the X to close that window. So, not too bad. If we go over to page 770, the bottom of that page, we can set the size of a scene, and we can also align the controls in an HBox layout container. So I can tell what size the scene's going to be, and then I can also say, hey, how do I want these controls to show up inside of this HBox or VBox or grid pane? Do you want them centered, left aligned, so on and so forth? If you notice that we've got POS, so POS is basically a class that's available to us, and notice it's got all uppercase, top underscore left, center underscore left, and bottom underscore left. So those are basically constants. Those are constants inside of the POS class. So we've also got top center, center, bottom center, top right, center right, bottom right. So how do we use those? Well, let's open up Hello World 2 and let's take a look. So this is pretty much exactly like the other one, except we've got a few more parameters we're going to utilize. So we come down here to the primary stage. Here I've got my label, message label, Hello World. HBox, we put the message label inside the HBox. Now look at this. Scene, new scene, we're going to put in the HBox, and we're going to tell it that we want it 300 wide by 100 tall. So now we're telling it what size we want the scene. Then notice we've got hbox.setAlignment pos.center. So we're telling it position.center. So center this thing. Then we set our scene. We put the scene inside of the stage. We set the title of the stage, and then we show the stage. And when we run it, look at that. Now we've got 300 by 100, and notice that the Hello World is centered inside of that scene. So the stage, think of the stage conforms to the scene. The stage is going to basically form around the stage or the scene, and then we basically tell it inside that scene where, and then the H box is really going to conform to the size of the scene as well, and then we told it to basically be centered inside of that H box. So any questions on that? So again, the scene, when we create a scene object, we can also just to tell it what size we want that scene to be. And then inside the H box, we've got that set alignment, and we can also change the position to center. And again, we could, well, it's not going to do it. So I could say top right and run it again. And there it is. Hello World's top right. I could do this. I could do center right. And when I run it, It's right aligned, but it's in the center between the top and the bottom. Now, before we continue, let's do this. Let's go back out to Google Classroom, and in our source files, you'll see that we have this images12.zip. Do you see that? Let's go ahead and download that. And then let's go to our download folder. And there we see images12.zip. Let's open that. And let's just grab, I don't want the images folder, I just want this Finland, and then hold down your shift key and click on sunset. And then I'm going to click copy. And now we need to go to our workspace. Do you remember where your workspace is? If you don't, you can come over here to Eclipse and click File, switch Workspace Other, and you'll see where your workspace is. There's my workspace. So I'm going to go there. Here's my workspace right here. And I'm going to double click on Chapter 12, and I'm just going to do a paste. Did you get that? Okay. So now at the bottom of page 772, we've got displaying images. Okay. And let's go ahead and open up Image Demo. And again, let's expand our imports and notice that we have our application, our stage, our scene, our HBox. Now we have an image and an image view. So to display an image, we need two items. We need two classes to do that. And we'll see how those work. So image and image view. So again, we got our launch, automatically calls this start. And here we're going to create an image object from the image class. So we've got image, new image, file, hotairballoon.jpg. And it's going to basically look for this image in the same exact folder as our project. Then I've got, now just like we've seen with the HBox, I'm going to create an image view object. And it's called image view. We're going to instantiate as a new image. Look what goes inside there. The image goes inside of the image view. Then I create an HBox, new HBox, and the image view goes inside of that. I create a scene, instantiate as a new scene, and the HBox goes inside of that. Then I basically put the scene inside of my primary stage. And then I set the title, Hot Air Balloon, and I show the stage. So again, boxes inside of boxes inside of boxes. So we go ahead and click on the run. And there is our hot air balloon. Now, we didn't specify a size for this, so it's going to conform to the size of the image. So this image is probably a pretty good size, and so this basically scene conform to the size of that image. So that basically is what determined how big this window is to hold this hot air balloon. Any questions on that? So we need an image and an image view. An image goes inside of an image view. The image view goes inside of a container, a layout, and then the layout goes inside of a scene. The scene goes inside of a stage. Now on page 775, we could do this. You don't have to do this, but I'm gonna copy this guy right here, and I'm gonna actually type in a URL. So this time, instead of pointing to a file inside of our folder, I'm going to have it go out to the internet to grab an image. So now when I run this, notice their image was a little bit smaller than the image we had. So notice the size of that guy. So we're not just restricted to files that are basically on our within our project, but we can actually go out to the internet and get pictures there as well. Any questions on that? On the middle of page 775, this is where we can set the size of an image. So in my image view up here, I'm going to go back to what we had before. So in my image view up here, it says image view image. We could do this. Just below that, we can type image view dot set fit width, and I can make that 100, and image view dot set fit height, and we'll make that 150. And now when we run it, look what it did. I could make them both 150. I could make them both 800. Wow, now I got a big old picture. So we can actually set the width and the height of that. Now, what if I just set one without the other? What if I'm gonna basically hide width or height. I'm gonna just leave width. I'm gonna run it, and look what it did. It kept the height of the original picture, and it just set the width. So the height came from the original picture. So if I made that a lot smaller, let's say I made that 300, again, it kept the original height of the original picture and then just changed the width. So the bottom line there is if you're going to change the height, make sure you change the width as well, and vice versa. Now, one thing we could have done is I could have set just the width to 800, and then I can come down here and say image view dot set preserve ratio, and I can make it true. So this particular method, it's expecting a Boolean, either true or false. So I just set the width to 800, but remember what I said, if we don't set the height, it's going to basically keep the original height of the picture. But if I say set preserve ratio, it's going to make sure that the height and width basically fit. So now when I run it, look what it does to the picture. So you can see right here, I did not change the height. I only changed the width. But since I have set preserve ratio, it's going to keep the height and width in the same perspective. So if it basically says this, if you change the width, I'm going to change the height and keep it in perspective, and vice versa. So if I came over here and just change, so I'm gonna basically comment that out, and then just this time I'm gonna do just the height. And now when I run it, I get the same thing. I change the height, and it says, oh, since you didn't change the width, I'm going to change the width so it keeps it in the same, what it calls to preserve the ratio. Any questions on that? That's probably a good thing to have. So even if I did this, even if I had those both commented out, that preserve ratio is probably kind of a nice thing to just have turned on, just to make sure that the picture doesn't look distorted ever. Okay. Now if I do this, I'm going to see if I can do this. I'm going to basically keep that empty. Notice I do not get an error. But what I can do, so the image view class has a no art constructor. But how do I get it in there? Well, I can actually do this. I can do image view dot set image, and that's where I would put the image object inside of there. So what's nice about this is I could display one image and then change it to another image through the set image. So the set image is a nice, so I don't have to keep the original image in there, and it should run just fine. Yep, runs just fine. So I can use the set image method to either set the image or change the image. So on bottom page 776, it says more about the HBox and VBox and grid pane layout. This is the layout containers provide methods for fine-tuning the way controls are arranged. So the HBox constructor, for example, allows us to display 3 images. So let's open up HBox images. And again, notice we've got an application, a stage, a scene. We're pretty much going to have those always. And then we've got an HBox image and image view. So down inside of our start, I've got image, moon image, ship image, and sunset image. And there's the 3 different files. Then I create an image view for each image. So the moon view has the moon image, the ship view has the ship image, and the sunset view has the sunset image. So again, I put the image inside of the image view. Then I come down here and look at this. I've got moon eye view dot set width to 200 and preserve the ratio equals true. So since I didn't set the height, it's going to make sure that the picture, the preserve ratio stays the same for the height as well. I do the same thing for the ship eye view, 200, preserve ratio true. Sunset eye view dot set width 200, preserve ratio equals true. I create an HBox layout container. I instantiate it as a new HBox, and look what I do. I got moon eye view, comma, ship eye view, comma, sunset eye view. I then put the HBox, and again, This H box has 3 different image views in it. I then put the H box inside of the scene as I instantiate a new scene. I put the scene inside the primary stage. I then set the title of the stage as images, and then I show it. And very simply, when we run it, there's all 3 images, all 200 wide by 200 height. Moon, ship, and sunset. Now, if I resize this window, notice it doesn't resize the pictures. It only resizes the window. I can make it much smaller, and look what the pictures do. So when we first run it, it automatically grabs, makes the stage fit around the images as a default. Any questions on that? Now, on the bottom of page 779, if you look on page 779, that's where it's talking about the root and the branch, or in this case it's leaves, because there's no branches. It just goes straight from a root to a leaf. But we got an H box as our root node, and then inside of that we've got a moon eye view as a leaf mode, a ship eye view as a leaf node, and a sunset eye view as a leaf node. Now, if we need to, we can actually put spacing between our pictures. And the way we would do that is up here when we got moon view, the very first parameter I can do is actually add a number. In this case, we're going to put 10. And that's going to basically put 10 pixel spacings around each picture. So if we run this, look what it did. It put some spacing between the pictures. Since we're in an H box, it only put them horizontal spacing. I didn't put any spacing anywhere else. Besides adding spacing, we can also add something called padding. Padding is a space that appears around the entire object and not just spacing to the right. Now, if it was a vertical a V box, it would have put the spacing vertically. We'll see more examples of those here in a little bit. So it says padding. If you want to add padding to an H box, you can call the H box set padding method. So let's open up the H box images with padding. And this is identical to what we saw a second ago, except guess what? I create my image view from each one of those image objects. Then I say moon eye view dot set fit with 200 preserve ratio true. I do that for each one of those. Then I come down here and I basically, now again, here's my 10. This is going to add the spacing to the right of each one of those items. And then I've got my hbox dot set padding new insets 30. An insets class in the JavaX geometry package included as necessary to in our program. So what we're doing is we're instantiate a new class insets, and it basically says 30. So it's going to basically put 30 pixels around each H box. Now, I want you to be aware. This is just around the H box. This isn't padding around each picture. This is the padding around the H box. The spacing here puts the spacing between the pictures. This puts 30 pixels around the entire H box. So now we put the H box in the scene in a stage, we set the title of the stage, and we show it. So now when we run it, okay, this 10 right here, or this spacing between this pictures and this picture, that's the spacing. I noticed the 30 pixels around the entire H box. Well, resize the window. It puts 30 pixels around the entire H box, not around each picture. Do you understand? Does that make sense? Trying to look to see if we can. Man, none of these allow us to do what we know so far. Oh, okay. Okay, so let's over on page 782. We've got our V-box container. And this is really no different than an H box, except it's vertical. It's going to go up and down where the H box went left and right. So if we just open up H box images with padding, I'm sorry, V box images with padding. Well, before we do that, let's open up V-box demo. So V-box demo. No, let's not do that. Let's do V-box images with padding. So V-box images with padding. We create the same image classes, the 3 image classes. We create the same image view classes, and then I got so the same set. Fit width 200, preserve ratio, do that for each one. The only difference now is we're creating a V-box object, and we're going to have spacing set to 10 between these 3 images, and then I say VBox.set padding new insets 30. Again, that's going to put 30 around the entire V-box and not just around the images. I put the V-box in the scene, I put the scene in the stage, I set the title of the stage, and I show the stage. And again, when we run it, this time it's a V-box, so it basically goes vertical and not horizontal. And again, there's our spacing 10, and there's our 30 spacing around the V-box. So V-box, H-box, identical, except the H-box goes left to right, and the V-box goes up and down. Now, bottom of page 784, we get into this thing called the grid pane layout container. And this is different than the H box and the V box, where a grid pane, we can specifically tell where things are going to appear within the container itself. And so grid pane is just like an H box. We say grid pane, the object name is instantiated as a new grid pane. Except now, well, let's open up grid pane demo. Grid pane demo. And notice that up here I now have I don't know why there's geometry insets is there. That shouldn't even be there. But I've got so I got my application, stage, and scene. Those are going to be needed for everything. Then I got layout, grid pane, and then I've also got a label. So I come down here inside of my primary, my start. I got my primary stage. I'm going to create 4 labels. I got this is label 1, this is label 2, this is label 3, label 4. I'm creating a grid pane object. There's grid pane equals instantiated as a new grid pane. I say grid pane.add, label 1. Where's it going to be added to? It's going to go in row 0, column 0. Label 2 is going to go in row 1, column 0. Label 3 is going to go in row 0, column 1. And label 4 is going to go in row 1, column 1. I go ahead and instantiate a new scene. I'm going to put in the grid pane, and it's going to basically be 200 wide by 100 tall. I put my scene inside of a stage, then I show the stage. Notice I didn't set a title. I did not set a title for my stage. So when we run it, notice we have no title right here. But notice I've got, this is label 1, row 0, column 0. This is label 2, row well, that's weird. Oh, they're going opposite. I've told you wrong. This is column and row. So column 0, row 0, column 1, row 0. Okay, I see what they did. Yeah, I'm used to everything being row then column. So anyway, so it's column 0, row 0, column 1, row 0. Okay, so label 1, label 2, label 3, label 4. Any questions on grid panes? Now on page 788, we can set H gaps and V gaps. So if we wanted to, we could actually put some gaps horizontally and vertically. So we could do this. I could come down here and say grid pane dot set H gap, and let's make it 10. And grid pane dot set V gap, and we'll make that 10 as well. And when we run it, notice we now have some spacing. We got some H gaps right here between the 1 and 2. We got a V gap between the rows. So H gap is the space between the columns, and the V gaps between the rows. Now you notice we got a lot of space down here, and that's because we made it 100. What if I would have made this only 50? And then ran it. Now we can see it's not as tall. So any questions on H gaps, V gaps, grid panes, columns? Yeah. Yeah, they threw me for a loop. It's column then row. Let's open up grid pane images. And so what this one is, we create an image for each picture. We create an image view, and then we go ahead and use our set width to 200 and then preserve the ratio for each one. And then I create a grid pane. And then I got my moon eye view is set to column 0, row 0. Ship eye view is column 1, row 0. Sunset eye view is column 0, row 1. And flower eye view is column 1, row 1. I go ahead and set my V gap and my H gap both to 10. I go ahead and set the padding around the grid. Now again, this is on the outside of the grid. This is not the inside of the grid, but the outside of the grid. We're going to have 30 pixels around the grid itself. We then put the grid inside the scene. We put the scene inside the stage. We set the stage title to images, and we show it. And when we run it, there it is. So here is our H gap, and here is our V. I'm sorry, yeah, that's our V gap, and then we got 30 pixels around it, and our set padding insets. Any questions on that? So again, on the top of page 791, it talks about the root and the leaf nodes, and the moon eye view, ship eye view, sunset eye view, and the flower eye view are all leaf nodes inside of the grid pane. Now at the bottom of page 791, excuse me for a sec. On the bottom of page 791, it says we can actually have multiple containers inside of a scene. So we don't have to have just a H box and a V box, and that's all we get. We can actually put other containers in there as well. So we could put an image inside of an H box, and we could also have a V box in there as well. So we're not just stuck with just one type of container. So we can actually put multiple in there. Okay, page 792, we get into what's called a button control, and we're going to get into the events. So I wanted to get into the events a little bit so that we could actually start working on some labs in the back of the book. So button controls, and then the event. And again, the event is something that we do. We either type, we click, we hover, but we're going to do something that's going to kick off code, an event handler, to basically execute whatever we do. So button control, the user can click and cause an action that we have programmed to take place. Okay. If you look there on page 792, it shows a picture of a button. So to create a button, you'll use a button class. So let's go ahead and open up button demo. Let's see what it looks like. Now, if we look up here in our imports, we can see that we have our application stage and scene. We're going to need those for everything. We've got a V-box, we've got a label. Now we've got a button, and then we've got here's our POS. Remember we used the POS part? There's where the POS class comes in. It comes in through the geometry within the Java FX. So there's the POS that we use to position something. So inside of our start, we create a label. The label says click on the button to see a message. We create a button called My Button. It's an object, My Button object, instantiated as a new button, and it's got click me. You can probably pretty much guess what that constructor is going to do. It's actually going to put it on the button itself that says click me. I create a V-box. We're going to have a padding of 10, and we're going to have my label and my button in there. So since it's a V-box, one's going to be on top of the other. I create my scene. We're going to put my V-box in there. It's going to be 300 wide by 100 tall. And then I do VBox.setAlignment position center. So everything inside of that V-box is going to be centered. It's going to be centered this way and this way. I go ahead and put my scene inside of my primary stage. I set the title, and then I show the stage. So let's click on it, or let's run it. And that's what it looks like. So let's click the button to see a message. I can click on the button. Nothing's going to happen because we don't have any code for that button. But notice we've got button demo. There's the button demo, that's the title. And it's set to 300 by 100, so 300 wide by 100 tall. If I basically set it to, let's say, 200 by 500 and ran it, it's going to basically look just like we programmed it. There's 200 by 500. So again, 300 by 100 is probably a good ratio for those. So it's probably better for these dialog boxes that we're displaying, these stages, it's probably better to have it wider than it is tall. So any questions on a button class? So page 794, we got this thing called handling events. So now what's going to happen when we click on something? So we can actually grab that particular event, in this case, the click event for a button. So an event is an action that takes place while a program is running. For example, each time the user clicks a button, an event takes place. When an event takes place, the control responds for the event created for the event object. So there's an event object we're going to be dealing with. The GUI control that created the event object is known as the event source. Each objects are instances of the event class. So there's an event class we're going to be dealing with. And we get that from the event package. Okay. So let's do this. Let's open up the event demo. That way there we have something we can look at when we're trying to go through this. So here in my start, I create a label and I instantiate it as a, well, let me take it back. Look what we did up here. I created a private label, my label. So I created a my label object. It's an empty shell of an object. And it's sitting at the top. It's sitting at the top, which means it's just inside the class. This is what's known as a global variable. Every method inside of this project has access to this global variable or object, this global object basically. So main has access, stage start has access, and every other method in here has access to that label. Okay. So here I create the label object called my label, and down here is where I instantiate it. I say my label is instantiated as a new label. Click the button to see the message. I create a button object, and on that button it's got click me. I say my button dot set. Now here's where we get the event handler. Before we continue, let's look at what's everything that's imported. So again, I'm always going to have application stage and scene. I got a VBox, I got a label, I got a button. I'm going to position it somewhere inside my container. And here's my event handler and my action event. So my button dot set on action. That's a method that's built into the button class. I think it's built into every one of the controls. I think all controls have a set on action. And we're going to instantiate it as a button click handler. Okay. Down here is my button click handler, but notice it's not a method. It's a class. Remember how we can create a class inside of a class? So I'm creating a new button click class inside of this class we currently have, our event demo class. So inside of our set action, we're going to instantiate a new button click handler. We create our VBox, We set the padding to 10. We put my label and my button inside of there. I create a scene, put the V-box in the scene. The size of the scene is 300 by 100. I'm going to say the V-box set alignment is position.center or POS.center. So it's going to center those things both vertically and horizontally. I put the scene inside the primary stage. I put a title on the stage, and then I click show. Now, what happens now when we click on this button? Here's this class. Class button click handler implements event handler. And then we've got, it's going to be basically, this event handler is basically going to be handled as an action event. So remember, I have action event up here. We got event handler and action event. So it implements the event handler class, and it's going to be treated as an action event. Okay. So the process of connecting an event handler object to a control is called registering. Registering the event button control has a method named setOnAction, passing the reference to an event handler object as an argument. So we're going to pass this button click handler from the setOnAction. We're going to pass that reference to the event handler down here. So button click handler implements event handler. So event handler is an interface. On page 795, it says, notice the first line of the class declaration ends with the clause implement event handler action event. This specifies that the class implements an event handler interface and the type of object. So the type of object is an action event. It says next, notice that the handle method has an action event parameter named event. So down here, notice this. We've got a method called handle. It returns nothing, void. And it's going to expect to get an action event object, and it's going to be passed in as event. So basically what it says is when we basically call this setOnAction method, which from this button click handler, it's going to basically call this method down here, handle, and it's going to display, thanks for clicking the button in the mylabel.set text. So right off the bat, it's going to say, inside the mylabel text, it's going to say, click the button to see a message. When we click on the button, it calls this button click handler, which is also an event handler, and it will call this handle event automatically because of this action event. This right here is the key. When we click on that, this is the event. The click event is what's being passed and causes this handle to be called, and it changes the text of the label to thanks for clicking the button. Does that make sense? You didn't sound real sure there. Okay, so let's run it. And when we click me, watch the text. It says, thanks for clicking the button. Now, we could do this. I'm going to set a breakpoint right here, toggle breakpoint, and I'm going to click on the debug button. By the way, I did add, in the classwork section, I did add a how to use the Eclipse debugger. If you click on that, I actually have a PDF chapter out of an Eclipse textbook that I have. And it basically just, we could spend an entire night on how to debug a Java program. But anyways, if you want to look through that yourself, you can. Okay. Oh, I got these all open. I got to close these. Okay. So I got a breakpoint set. I'm going to click debug. Click allow. I'm going to switch. So now I'm sitting right here, my button.set on action. I'm going to basically step into that. And notice it comes down here to the button click implements event handler and action event. I step over and it comes back to the my button set on action. So now here's what that's done. That's now set the click event to the my button. So what that's doing, think of this way. Now that we have that button click handler set to this button set on action, it's sitting there waiting for you to do something. It's just sitting there waiting. As soon as you click, that's when it goes into action. So it's not gonna do anything until we click on it. So now, but what we've done is we've attached that class, this button click handler, to this my button set on action method. I step over, builds my VBox, I build my scene, I set my alignment, I set the scene, I set the title, and now I'm going to call the show. So it displays. It's not quite done yet. I got to step through it. Oh, I hate that. Oh, now we're in assess control. Oh, I'm going to step return. There we go. Return. Return. Yeah, it's going to go through all those interface code and all of the other extend code. It's going to go through all that stuff. Okay, so now we got this. Now watch what happens when I click on click me. I just ran all the way through. But anyways, so again, when we execute line 38, all it does is adds this class button click handler to the set on action method. And it's just sitting there waiting for us to do something. In this case, it's a click event. The button is a click event. So when we click on it, it automatically executes this handle method inside of this event handler. And again, right here is the key. The event happens to be in this class, the click. Any questions? Okay, let's cover one more section and then we'll do some labs. We got reading input with text. I'm sorry, what? Okay. So reading input with text field controls. So now we got button events, we've got labels, and we got containers or VBox, HBox, and grid panes. But now let's get some data from the user to do something. So the text field control is a rectangular area that can accept keyboard input from the user. And right there on page 799, we've got text field. My text field is instantiated as a new text field. Now, the text field class has a method called getText. So whatever we type in that box, we can use the getText method to get that from the text box so that we can then do something with it. Now, if we look over the top of page 800, there we've got our VBox root node. So there's our root node, but inside there we've got an HBox branch node. I'm putting an HBox inside of a VBox. And inside of that branch node, I have two leaf nodes, the prompt label and the kilo text field. Inside the root node, I have the leaf node calc button and the leaf node result label. So let's take a look at kilo converter. So kilo converter, let's take a look at the imports. We've got our HBox, VBox, we've got our position, we've got our insets, we've got labels, text field, buttons, and here's our event handler and action event. Okay, we need those two for our event handler. Extends application. We have two global object variables. We've got kilo to text, and we've got result label. So again, once we create those as global, every method inside of here has access to them. Inside of my start, I've got label, prompt label is instantiated as a new label, enter the distance in kilometers. Kilo to kilo text field. So up here's my kilo text field. We're going to instantiate it as a new text field. My button, calc button, is instantiated as a new button and it says convert. My calc button set on action is a new calc button handler. Result label is instantiated as a new label. So here's my result label up here. We're going to instantiate it as a new label. I'm going to create two containers, an HBox, spacing of 10. It's going to have the prompt label and the kilo text field. So they're going to basically be this way. They're going to be horizontal. I'm going to create a VBox container. I'm going to have the spacing set to 10, and I'm going to put my HBox inside of here along with the calc button and the result label. So we're going to have an HBox at the top. Below that's going to be a calc button, and below that's going to be the result label. I'm going to set the VBox alignment to position center. I'm going to set the padding inside the VBox around the VBox. So padding around the VBox is going to be 10. I'm going to put my VBox in the scene. Now my HBox is inside the VBox. I put the scene inside the primary stage, and I set the title to kilometer converter, and I do the show. Down here for my event handler, I'm calling it calc button handler. Here's my handle method and the event. In this case, it's going to be a click. The click event is going to call this handle, and it's going to create a it's going to create a variable kilometers, a double variable kilometers, and it's going to be instantiated as a double.parse double. And notice it's got kilo text field .get text. So it's going to grab the text of that text box, convert it to a double, and put it into kilometers. I'm going to create a double miles variable, and it's equal to kilometers times 0.6214. And then in the result label .set text, so I've got get text and set text. And this is a label. Now the thing about a label is, I don't think is there a get text on a label? No, we can get text from a label. Okay. But a label is really designed just to display text. So I say result label dot set text string dot format. Remember, this is just like a printf. it's going to have the comma separator. It's going to be rounded to 2 decimal places, and it's a floating decimal point. It's going to say miles, and miles is going to be put wherever that percent sign is and converted to 1,000 separated 0.2. So the event, in this case it's the click event, is going to call the handle method, and this is when this gets executed. And this event handler is attached to the calc button set on action method. So when we run it, so you can see this top part is our H box, and it has the label of the text box in it. And they're side by side, and it's got a 10 spacing in here. Then I've got that H box is inside of a V box. So I've got H box, the button, and we can't see it, but there's a label right here, the result label. If we look up here, the result label is just instantiated as a new label. It's got nothing in it. We don't set it till down here in the handle event or handle method when we say result label.set text. Okay. So if we come in here and type in 60 for kilometers and click convert, that's 37.28 miles. And this program is still running. This event handler is still waiting for us to do something. And I can change it to 120 or 102. Click convert, and that's 63.638 miles. This program's still running. This event handler is listening. It's waiting for us to do something again to run this handle event or handle method. Sorry. I can change it to 78, and that converts to 48.47 miles. It doesn't stop running until I click this X right here. Then the program stops running. Any questions on that? Okay.